the new Andhra Pradesh to, on a progressive basis, do it for the entire region. So now we will see it. So till now we have only seen it in, as you said, sir, 4 feeders in Solapur, 3 feeders at one place in Hooghly, 2 feeders at another place in Hooghly. But now we are going to do it district-wise. So again, the kinds of both costs and benefits that occur on large scale, we will now start seeing.
One question I have. Why Delhi is not having KVH type?
So we are having.
They do, except for residential.
Yeah,
We are having
also. I think it is also indirect.
Sir is saying.
That will reduce the loss because these days the housing society is kind of taking one connection. It is compelled rather. So if that bill is not raised at the KVH, then they will not install, say, power factor correction, automatic correction factors and all. Ultimately, okay, payment is one part, another part is the loss of energy. So that part, I think UP and all, I think from 10 years down the line.
No, but single point connection, high tension is being given. I think that may be in KVA.
Even for housing.
Yeah, yeah.
Housing society, I am seeing ऊपर लिखा है, नीचे में KWH भी लिखा हुआ है.
So the high tension is.
Because it is related with the loss, energy saving and all.
Basically, it's on power factor billing. So it is assumed for the low-end consumers, the power factor is assumed to be 1 unit.
No, he is talking of the single point.
As low as I have heard in my house.
Sir, you are right. High tension.
Yes.
It is.
It is KVH.
There is a power factor bonus that you give. If the power factor is more than something else, there is a bonus that is
It's
given.
like in MERC, you have a penalty for power factor, and you also have a bonus for that.
These days,
But our
air
experience
conditioner are so high, sir. Usually so high, and if the air conditioner
Correct.
is not built-in feature of correcting power factors and all, it is wasting a lot of energy. Power factor is as poor as 0.7, 0.6. In my house, I was astonished. 0.7 power factor. I put some correction factors and now it is okay.
I'll give you an example. The CFLs that were being sold in the market had a power factor of 0.3, 0.4.
Yeah, that is a very good example.
So when we brought in an Indian standard that it has to be 0.9 or better,
Yeah.
there was such an uproar. Representations were sent even to the Prime Minister's office. But ultimately it has gone through, ultimately it has happened, but it was not without a lot of pain.
Any other? Yes. Introduce yourself.
In the 3 days discussion, the main point what we could gather, or the fact is that all problems behind the power is power, that is political power. So all, be the issue of subsidies supply to agriculture or low-end society or whatever it is. So anything to happen in the power sector has been with the blessing of political leadership. So is there the effort which is taking place to educate that particular group of elites, MPs, MLAs or decision makers who actually learn what is what and decide on merit? So how far this kind of conferences are going to be helpful? We are all people who are dealing with technology, but decisions are not related to technology. Neither voltage, current or power factor plays into that. There something else is playing. So the right education should go to the people, those who are at the decision making level. Is there an effort in that direction?
It is not as if people don't know. Of course they know. When a political decision is made that in a particular state the tariffs are low or that power for agriculture is either free or very near zero, it's not as if the politicians don't know. The point is they have no incentive. All their incentives are, if I can provide cheap electricity, I can possibly win more votes next time, right? So, you know, in economic terms, you would say that there is no convergence of incentives. What can we do about it? This will continue as long as the chief ministers have a say in what is the tariff that is determined in the state. What we saw with the Electricity Act 2003 was that by separation of the transmission and the generating companies, the generating companies and the transmission companies are now in better health. I will not, many places they are not in good health, but they are in better health than the distribution companies. So at the end of the day, because of the low tariffs, the distribution companies continue to be in financial loss. That is the main reason behind the amendment which is separating out carriage and content. See what it does. The electricity distribution company now owns the electricity lines. And just as with transmission companies today, the distribution companies of tomorrow will be paid for each kilowatt hour of electricity that is carried on the wires and the transformers that they own. Right? So the regulator decides, just as they do for transmission companies today, that you will get 1 paisa or 2 paisa for the electricity that goes. That's all the money that they will get. Right? This is a state government-owned company, distribution company. Now, the vast bulk of the money is on the supply side. Now there are supply companies who are buying electricity from NTPC, NPCIL and whatever. NTPC could make its own company which is doing that, and then has a contract with the consumer that I am going to supply to you. That is a contract between you and him, possibly subject to certain maxima which the regulator sets, like your telephone, your cell phone. So Airtel or Vodafone or whoever has, the regulator has set maximum rates, but then the rates between which you pay are based on a bouquet that they offer. And you can choose which one you want. There will be a government company which will also be there as a supply company. You can also buy from them. That will supply to some percentage, 5%, 10%, 15%, some percentage of the people. Consequently, that is the only place where the state ministers can have a say. That's the only place where they can, through which they can offer lower costs. Obviously, reliability will also be lower. I'm extending the analogy too much, so please take it with a pinch of salt. That company would be like BSNL. You have a state company also on the phone side which is providing services. And it is performing the role of being the provider of last resort. Consequently, what could happen? All of these are subject to a lot of debate. We don't know how the amendments will finally go through them. But what is a possibility is that for the vast number of consumers have connections with supply companies which are able to supply them electricity with reliability that they are comfortable with and prices that they are comfortable with. So you would see a bouquet of services being offered which will then reflect what the consumer needs and which would not, or at least minimize what the influence of the political system on the price of electricity. But again, this is my interpretation and I hope it remains within this.
Any other question?
So what is the status of PAT scheme?
The first cycle of PAT is over. The results are coming in, they are being reviewed. There were 478 units which were covered by PAT, under which each of them had been given a specific target for the reduction in their specific energy consumption, including power stations, including cement, aluminium, fertilizer and so on. The results that have been validated thus far indicate that about 4/5 of the companies have exceeded their targets. 1/5 have not. It is too early to say how many, but it also seems that the number of e-certs that we will issue will be far more, maybe thrice more, as compared to the shortfall that will occur for those who haven't met their targets. But these very early numbers, another 2 weeks we should have.
Trading has not yet started. Trading
No.
One question.
On these targets, we don't know. The feeling in the system is that the targets were lower and it was easy to achieve. Whether that feeling existed in BE also, or it was consciously done?
When we started, we had no idea whether the targets are too tight or too lax. So what we had done was we saw what each sector had been doing over the past few years, and we saw that it was about a 1% decline in the specific energy consumption that was happening. That was the average. We looked also at the results that had come through the National Energy Conservation Awards program, where we were seeing about a 2.1% decline in the specific energy consumption. So we said, let's fix it in between these. So we fixed it at about 1.5, I think, for a total of 4.5 over 3 years. But I emphasize the fact that at that point of time we didn't have any idea whether this is too high or too low. So next stage will obviously be much more tighter than it is this time.
Any last question? Then I have a question.
Mr. Raja, Dr. Pramod Dev, Mr. Verma, Mr. Sudhakar, our close friends. Sir, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry I could not join you earlier in the day, but I'm so glad that I have this opportunity to share my views and thoughts with all of you. So you spoke of the various things that have been discussed. I would specifically point to 5 of the issues. So you talked of the new amendment and the separation of carriage and content and the kinds of challenges that it will create. That you have multiple supply companies and therefore from the distribution company side, the ability to be able to provide the switching infrastructure between supply companies. And from the generating company's side, the challenge of linking up with multiple supply companies on various kinds of contractual arrangements. So you spoke of the renewable energy and nuclear energy. Again, on the renewable energy side, we are stuck with the issue of intermittency, which brings into question the need for storage. You, sir, mentioned the issue of balancing, and the amendment calls for balancing markets. But what will those balancing be? Do we know how to do it? Even if we know how to do it, what does it do to costs? On the issue of energy efficiency and climate change, so what we see is that the peaks every year, which typically are now occurring in the last week of August, are largely driven by air conditioning. Every year this increases. Sudhakar Saab is grapples with this on an yearly basis when he sees peaks in August of 6,000 megawatts, and in October it comes down to something like 3,000 megawatts. So this huge difference is something that we have to grapple with. And clearly energy efficiency, particularly energy efficiency in air conditioning, is going to play a major role in order to make sure that the losses to the distribution companies are minimized. On climate change, you had an interesting discussion, and clearly again the challenge of integrating a large amount of non-carbon fuels into the economy, and much of it being intermittent comes into play. Raju Saab in his introductory remark said that this leads to technical problems and it leads to economic problems. Sir, I would like to add that this is compounded by the fact that the technical and the economic problems also are in a sense unknown when you begin. Because technologies evolve, their costs evolve, their performance evolves. Also, as you know, when you had 1% renewables in the grid, it was not a problem. But when it grows to 20%, there is a problem. Therefore, the evolution of each of these 5 issues that I talked about also has an emergence concept. That means as they all become larger and larger in size, problems will emerge which we don't know today. I would therefore like to address these 5 issues from the point of view of 3 people. One is distribution companies, one is regulators, and the third is financial institutions. What does it mean? Let me start with the regulators. The Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission has been, I think, one of the most proactive in the country in linking the tariffs to demand. If you are using more electricity, you pay more. And there is a progressive tariff chart. What this enabled was that in Delhi at least, Mumbai has always been used to it, but Delhi at least, we were able to move towards a reliable power system. If I needed more power, and as long as I was willing to pay for it, it was no issue. So the issue of subsidizing the lowest category of electricity users, the lowest kilowatt hours per month, and balancing it by much higher costs on the people who use electricity at the margin is a concept which I think all regulators have to move to. It is unfortunate that in this city state, the government has questioned this. And again, sir, you had mentioned that electricity is seen as a merit good. And as long as it is seen as that instead of being a pure commodity, I think we will continue to have problems. So, first of all, even before we take all of these problems into account, on the regulatory side, having a tariff structure which reflects on the one hand costs, on the second hand the ability of people to pay, and I would say on the third, the ability to make it, to bring in efficiencies both for the consumer as well as for the supply company becomes important. Now, as we move ahead, I think one of the challenges that we face is how do regulators take into account that you are having new technologies which today are high cost, may become lower cost in the future, and may have system effects as their size grows. We worked with the Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission, Mr. Sudhakar and his colleagues, on one particular area, which is bringing in LED bulbs into the city. To cut a long story short, the methodology that was used was that company, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, into which NTPC, Power Grid, Power Finance Corporation and REC are the stakeholders, would buy the bulbs, procure them in bulk because that reduces costs, and provide them to consumers at a cost decided by the Regulatory Commission. The electricity company would recover the costs at 10 rupees a month with the bill and provide the money to EESL. So there are no subsidies, but it is routed through the electricity bill. Now, over a period of time, When the first bulbs were procured in Pondicherry, they were procured at 310 rupees. It came down to 240, 204 and so on, till now they are being procured at 73 rupees. So they are being sold to consumers at 93 rupees. The key issue is that one, of course, ESL did some amount of balancing across the states, but the key issue is that the regulators allowed a business model in which the cost could be passed on to consumers with the recovery being done through the electricity companies. Sir, I think you're also looking at something, or you have already approved a similar program for air conditioners, which I think is now the test case, because this is what will influence what happens to peak. If a large enough investment in efficient air conditioners occurs, then the increase in the peak would be less than what it would happen otherwise. Now we will see similar effects of both of size and of scale. The point that was raised by Dr. Dev, electricity companies don't like this. Yes, they don't. The only saving grace, sir, and again it is for a period of time, is that today, at the margin, especially during peak hours, most electricity companies run a loss. They at least run a operating revenue loss, if not a loss on an average scale. Consequently, if they are able to procure electricity, less electricity at the time when it is most expensive, this minimizes the overall loss that they face. As we move into the balancing markets, regulators will be faced with newer issues. How do I load the costs? To whom do I load the costs? When do I load the costs? Are they done across to all consumers? Are they done to particular consumers? Are they done on each renewable unit that is added to the grid? I must confess, the answers are still not known. But what is clear is that the regime that we use for pricing the balancing power would clearly affect how much of the renewables will be picked up by the distribution companies, and also the time at which it will be picked up. This leads me to the conclusion that as far as the regulators are concerned, moving towards time of day tariffs, at least for industrial and commercial consumers, becomes more important. Let me now move to the distribution companies themselves. Distribution companies of today, who are both the providers of electricity as well as the owners of the wires, face the challenge of, on the one hand, maintaining a relatively large infrastructure, and on the other hand, with tariffs which are not remunerative. We have seen across the country various kinds of interventions driven by regulators to see how the electricity companies can procure enough resources for upgradation of the infrastructure, essentially wires, transformers, etc. However, the kinds of challenges that occur in ensuring that tariffs are such that the distribution companies have discretionary money in their pockets, which they can invest either in infrastructure or in manpower or in future contracts that they buy, is almost not there. What does this mean? This means that distribution companies would need to move more and more, and again this is something where the regulators also come in, more and more towards a regime where almost all infrastructure is paid for over a period of time. Because what do distribution companies have? They have a regular revenue income. The problem is capital. Consequently, if on the same piece of equipment, if I can pay for 5 years, link it with performance. I as a distribution company will be far better off than if I have to pay all of it at once. I fully realize that what I say is not the easiest thing to implement. But it's not as if it's not implementable. There are examples of how this has been done. And there are examples of how the contracting can be managed to carry this out. I think the most important issue in terms of distribution companies is transparency in the investment and more importantly in the physical infrastructure that is put up as a result of the investment. The growth in information technologies makes it particularly easy to be able to track what are the investments and upgradations that have occurred and make them available to be known by everybody so that you not only know what has been done, you can also see it in real time what has been done. Consequently, investment in IT technologies, I believe, becomes a key issue for the distribution companies, whether it is for smart grids, whether it is for renewables, whether it is energy efficiency, or whether it is plain and simple for knowing how much electricity has gone anywhere. We come to the main issue of, okay, I can put a lot of meters, it's a lot of expenditure, I can put it up to the distribution. But when it comes to meters for at the end consumer, particularly for the agriculture sector, what do I do? And there, as Dr. Dev Manshi mentioned, a via media, a short-term via media could be to separate out the agricultural and the domestic feeders in rural areas to ensure that at least we know what is the amount of electricity that is being supplied to the agricultural sector and when. Let me move to the last sector, which is going to be impacted directly by these, and that is the financial institutions. Financial institutions today face a challenge in as much as all the lending limits, particularly to distribution companies, have already been fully exhausted. And every new loan, therefore, becomes a challenge. And all kinds of financial mechanisms are employed in order to make sure that the sector continues to get credit. All of us know that it was not that long ago that one very large state, the distribution companies faced a virtual shut-off of credit. So, if we are moving into the future, when the number of, in a sense, moving parts, whether it is the people who are going to do demand-side management, will this happen or will it not happen? The number of people who are going to invest in renewables, okay, when does it come in? Do I provide financing for an evacuation facility? Investment for balancing services. How do I know how much is needed? Will this recover itself? All of these become issues that are today uncertain. Because of uncertainty and because of lack of clarity in what happened over a period of 3 to 6 years, there is a natural tendency to say, okay, not only are the risks high, but actually I don't know how to calculate the risk. Consequently, let me not finance it. This, I think, is in a sense closing our eyes to the future. Again, I come back to my stock answer. Is there an answer? No, I don't know the answer. But the only way that we can find out an answer is to see how this can be done for a specific project, even though if it is a very small project. By carrying out programs, what I call as bite-sized programs, in each bite-sized projects, in each of these areas, we get a feeling of one, what are the direct costs and what are the direct benefits. Over the longer term, excuse me, And as we do more of them, we get an idea of what are the system effects of each of these interventions. To sum up, I think that the kinds of pressures that are occurring on the electricity sector are tremendous. Even if we had an electricity sector that was technically efficient and financially viable, even then, these kinds of challenges would be enough to throw any professional, whether in the technical side or the financial side, of whatever they had learned in their 20-30 years of experience. But in the presence of a sector that is on the one hand growing and growing to the poorest, where the ability to pay is limited, where the demand is relatively small and therefore technical losses are high, and on the other side, ensuring that the total demand has much more balancing, much more renewables, much more energy efficiency, is a challenge that will continue to be with us. Nevertheless, as I said, we cannot fish it out. What I think we need to do is to establish groups of people from these different stakeholders and start doing projects so that we can add to the knowledge of how we can move ahead, what the direct costs and direct benefits are. Thank you very much.